welcoming folks into the space. We're going to be dropping in a Google Doc for you all to check in with one another. While we wait for people to find their way. So you'll notice that there's kind of a general check-in question for you on the Google Doc as you enter into the room. And as we're waiting for all of our folks to join here today, just wanting to give you a little bit of time to enjoy the music, check in on the Google Doc that you will find in the chat. Go ahead and enter into that Google Doc, find a square, and start offering your responses with one another. And we were reflecting that you don't have to be part of a direct service mechanism to be able to create the conditions for children and youth to thrive. This is an all hands on deck. So as you are entering and checking in on the Google Doc, think of what you do from your perspective or from your positional standpoint to create the conditions necessary for children, youth, and families to thrive. I see that there's a couple of folks that are getting in there, maybe beginning to think about typing. We're just creating a little bit of space while folks are joining. So I'd encourage you, if you're thinking about typing, maybe just start with an easy one. Just throw your name in there, in the organization you work for. Thanking those that have joined from the beginning and welcoming those that continue to join. First, offering a little bit of time in the beginning for folks to check in on the Google Doc that you see in the chat box. Let's go ahead and throw some information into check-in prompts. What strategies do you use to create conditions for thriving? Remembering that these strategies can take place from any positional perspective, not just a direct service. You are not direct service, you are supporting direct service in some way. So how is it that you create conditions for kids and families to thrive? We're going to still allow a couple more minutes for folks to engage here. And thank you. I'm seeing Jennifer and Jane, Mai and Tina and Kim. Thank you for your responses. Your engagement helps us all learn from one another, and that's how this all works. So I'm noticing that our waiting room and the dings of new folks that are joining are starting to slow down. So go ahead and take just the next minute or two and check in on that Google Doc. If you haven't clicked on that link on the Google Doc, I'll offer further incentive to do so. All of the resources that we're going to be sharing today are linked at the bottom of this Google Doc, including the slide deck. And we'll be capturing your questions along the way in this document as well. Kim and Haley for jumping in and offering your thoughts. Still a couple trickling in, and as you join, we are checking in on this Google Doc, reflecting on from our position. What is it that we do to create the conditions? Find the music and pause it here, and we can get getting started. So wanting to, here we go. Thank you all for taking the time to check in with us today. And a reminder, we have a really dynamic presentation today, and what we're going to offer, right, that was our first opportunity for engagement. You're going to hear a little bit from me, myself, Jeff Davis, with the California After School Network, about sort of the context and the opportunity at hand, get a chance to interact and have some discussion, surface some questions. Then we'll get a chance to hear from Marianne Justice, who is not Lupita Alcala, who we had in our earlier session, from West Ed, and she's going to share with us a hot off the presses resource, an integrated care resource guide that is created by education leaders throughout the state on how to integrate multiple funding sources at the LEA level for comprehensive supports for kids and families. Then we're going to get a chance to hear from Jennifer Cisneros about the fantastic work that Santa Ana Unified is doing to do just that. And also just wanting to share, right, one of the things that Sarah Neville Morgan said at the beginning of today is that we need 2022's programs, not 2019's programs. And so in that process, right, nobody has it all figured out, and we're all on this journey together. But we'll at least be able to hear of some of these great sort of practices from a local education agency that is on the journey. And of course, you heard more from them during the lunchtime plenary as well, from the leadership of Santa Ana Unified School District. So just wanting to welcome you and thank you, and sort of let you know that's going to be the lay of the land today. And welcoming our new folks. Anyhow, let's go ahead and sort of get started. So I want to thank the National Aspen Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development, because they've created some really great materials, such as the ones that you're seeing in front of you, right? And reflecting on this, right, like some of us would go to work for a lot of different reasons at different times, right? That we might be looking specifically at how to develop academic development or skill development or social emotional development, right? But in terms of these pieces, as we work to develop these variety of skills, we're really working to develop a whole person that is ready to succeed in school, work, life. And there are conditions that sort of foster this level of development that we're going to sort of dive into a little bit. But I did also just want to offer a little bit of history and context and background around the spirit of expanded learning, kind of what is expanded learning, and also offer you the perspective that this is not California's first great expanded learning expansion. The first expanded learning expansion took place in 2006 and was the result of a ballot initiative on the state of California, actually put forward by Arnold Schwarzenegger before he was governor. And literally in 2006, thousands of programs were created overnight. And many of them were wondering, as many of you are, right? How can I be compliant with this new program that I am launching literally overnight? Soon after folks understood compliance, they moved out of the security and safety piece and started moving down the developmental trajectory towards self-actualization. And they started asking themselves the next question, which was, okay, I have a compliant program. Well, what would it mean if I had a good program? And that was at the same time that we were just on the heels of Bonnie Bernard releasing her seminal text, Resiliency, What We Have Learned. And the after-school programs office at the time did a really smart thing, and in my personal opinion, I think in Jennifer's too, because we just learned that we were convened to be part of a statewide training cohort to sort of talk about this research on resiliency and positive youth development and work with this newly sort of growing and expanding system of expanded learning programs so that they could create those types of conditions in their programs. And those factors are, and it's really, what I want to stress about this too, is that this is about context, condition, environment, right? That when children in a variety of environments, school, family, expanded learning programs, when they experience the protective factors of caring relationships, high expectations, and opportunities for meaningful participation, their developmental needs are met, strengths are developed that result in the type of outcomes that were in that sort of previous slide, the type of all of the above outcomes, right? That help students succeed in school, work, and in life. Well, fast forward 15 years or so, the National Aspen Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development releases two publications. And one of them, want to just stress, building partnerships in support of where, when, and how learning happens, really acknowledges that learning happens in school, in expanded learning programs, in families, in the community, that there is a lot of learning that's happening everywhere, and that the more those folks can be linked and partnered to support that learning and development, the better that's going to be for kids and families. But what they also did was surface a lot of the research from the science of learning and development that many years later did the same thing that Bonnie Bernard had been doing. And it found very similar things, that learning happens in context, that development happens in context, and that those contexts look very familiar to those that were surfaced from Bonnie Bernard in 2004. So if you look at this framework that was put forward by that commission, you can see that caring relationships, high expectations, and opportunities for meaningful participation are all woven throughout this. What I really do love about this part is that there's a focus on equitable learning environments, right? So this sort of new layering of cultural relevance and equity-driven practices really comes out in this framework. But as you can see that when those similar conditions and contexts exists, that's the types of conditions and contexts that result in success in school, work, and life, the type of all of the above outcomes that we really go to work each and every day to achieve. These are the types of contexts and conditions that are woven into the quality standards for expanded learning in California. And I can say that for a fact because I was there to support the development of these quality standards. So these notions of resiliency, positive youth development, and other things like learning and after school and summer principles were integrated as a foundation for these. So you can see the caring relationships coming through in the safe and supportive environment, the high expectations coming through in skill building and youth voice and leadership, the opportunities for meaningful participation coming through in active and engaged learning, right? In an environment that's safe and accessible for all. So quality expanded learning programs really do support those all of the above outcomes, right? That we go to work each and every day to achieve. The other thing that the commission really felt was important to surface was that if we understand that these are the conditions for learning and development, that we should really make sure that those conditions are present in all of our learning environments, and that we need to be supporting our adults, our teachers and educators and expanded learning professionals to support that development. And that what we want to make sure we're also doing is that we're aligning our school and community resources to support whole children. And that bottom one, in terms of research and practice, I look at as something that is also core and central to expanded learning programs, which is continuous quality improvement, or CQI. Other pieces, right? We have community schools that are rising in importance, and you can see that expanded learning programs are one of the 4 essential pillars for a community school, in addition to active family and community engagement. One of the things that I like to sort of share about expanded learning programs in terms of family engagement as well is that kids after school can walk off of a school campus, but to leave the expanded learning program, a guardian is checking that student out. And so there's a daily opportunity for family engagement and connection to integrated supports for students and for families. So expanded learning is a huge part of this alignment of community resources through a community schools model as well. And just to offer you a little bit of the context of expanded learning, sort of BC before COVID and also after COVID, we had the largest system of expanded learning in the nation before COVID. There was also a statewide system of support, of which the California AfterSchool Network and 16 county offices are a part of. And that system served California's most vulnerable children and youth and those that needed it the most. And this is the intent also of our new Expanded Learning Opportunities program, to serve unduplicated students. I also just want to say that the Expanded Learning program is a critical resource in good times. It's an even more critical resource in times of crisis. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, I just want to give it up to our expanded learning programs in California, because they were there to find families that were hard to find, to check on them and see how they were doing, to be an essential part of meal provision. The picture that you see there is from Los Angeles, where the LA's Best After School program became sort of the core of LA's entire food distribution to families. We were the first, oftentimes the expanded learning staff, to provide the learning hubs in-person learning for those that needed it most, right? Think of homeless students and those students that didn't have access to online learning. So these were critical resources to our communities in time of need, and they're critical resources to support positive youth development in good times. With all that in mind, the California AfterSchool Network leadership team really took a look at, if we know that expanded learning in California is already a foundation for physical, social, and emotional wellness, already a vehicle for food security and food distribution, how is it that we can better network with other services throughout the community to make sure that our children and families have access to healthcare, mental health services, and other human services and social services that might be available to them, but that they aren't necessarily accessing. And with that in mind, the California AfterSchool Network, with funding from the Youth Opioid Response California, convened the Whole Child Health and Wellness Collaborative, which convened right before the COVID-19 pandemic, and then worked through the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the inequities that were exacerbated from that pandemic came to light. We took an equity pause, and we worked with the Equity Meets Design group for 2 days as a design team, and really looked at equity design principles and making sure that they were central to what we were putting forward. And really what the group came to sort of learn and believe was that it's not going to be enough to tinker around the edges of systems that have historically produced inequities, that we should actually take a look at our systems and look at who they are actually designed to serve. That if we're asking kids and families to sort of bend and contort to rigid bureaucracies, but in fact, those bureaucracies ought to be bending to serve them. And so how is it that we can leverage our systems, weave and combine multiple resources to collaborate across systems, support the adult educator workforce that is supporting our kids and families, and really have our systems focus on their needs, and as opposed to them needing to conform to difficult systems. And for many months, we went through that process where we convened, developed a shared vision. We took our equity pause and we developed what are called shared equity strategies that are outlined in a document called A Statement of Strategic Direction Toward Equity-Driven Whole Child Health and Wellness. And what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to drop in a blog post into the chat that really it's at the bottom of your Google resource sheet, but it really talks about this journey, and it creates access as well to these documents. Our stakeholders developed numerous strategies in each of those 4 content areas, and I'll go back, focusing on the family, support and nurture the adult workforce, leveraging and braiding resources and collaborating across systems. So those are strategies that anyone can access through these documents and then consider on how to apply those strategies in each of their communities, understanding that these strategies were informed by multiple sectors, including education, expanded learning, health, mental health, substance use prevention, intervention and treatment, etc. All that in mind, right? All that was happening when those orange bars were true, right? Then now here we're entering an after COVID phase where we've received $4.6 billion in expanded learning opportunities grants. The new expanded learning opportunities program is funded at $1.75 billion, growing to $4.4 billion in this budget year, with a pledge to take it up to $5 billion in future budget years. So we have a real opportunity in California. And that opportunity is not only, as the Expanded Learning Division describes, right, combining multiple expanded learning funding sources into one comprehensive program for expanded learning. But now we have the opportunity to combine multiple funding sources, all invested in at unprecedented levels, as one comprehensive approach to supporting our kids and families. So our question to you, and we're about to break in to some small groups, is how can we rapidly advance this vision now? What can we do to put the pieces in place that might end up being sustainable partnership bridges over time? And when we look back, will we say that we seized the moment, or will we say that we tinkered around the edges until we got back to normal? So I'm going to drop that Google Doc back in to our chat box. And the reason I'm going to drop it in is because in that Google Doc, you'll remember there is a garden. The prompt for you is to really just reflect on what you've heard so far, have a conversation with your colleagues, and the challenge being for you and your small group to surface at least one question that you'd put in the garden. You're gonna have about 5 minutes to hang out with your people, and you can do that now. Welcome back.
I'm sorry, Margarita, I didn't mean to leave you mid-sentence.
I kept talking. I'm like so excited. I was like, oh, she's gone.
No, I know.
It's okay.
Zoom.
It's okay, no problem.
I didn't mean to hit. I don't know what those okay. Buttons. Sorry about that. But I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. It would appear that we're here. I'm going to just offer a moment of transparent facilitation as your tour guide along this journey. So as you can see, what we're trying to do is sort of sandwich little content nuggets in between interaction pieces of bread. So, right, we started with sort of putting our check-in, and then we got to hear a little bit about the context and the opportunity that we have with expanded learning in California, and then some chances for us to interact and reflect on that. Next, we're going to get to hear from WestEd. They're going to be able to share with us a new hot off the press resource, the Integrated Care Field Guide, that talks about 6 specific funding sources and how they can be integrated for comprehensive whole child supports. And then you're going to get a chance to reflect again. And then we'll get to hear from Santa Ana Unified School District and LEA that is working intentionally to do this level of integration, and then write more reflection dialogue. So with all of that said, I wanted to just remind folks that there's an opportunity in that Google Doc. If you scroll down right above the resources that we're sharing with you as part of this workshop, there's a thing called the garden. So we encourage you to plant your questions and ideas in the garden. We will make sure that we pull from those, and those seeds will grow into answers in the best form that we can offer today. And potentially we can follow up and offer further resources, et cetera, down the road. That being said, I want to welcome and offer my gratitude to Marianne Justice from WestEd. We'll offer her an opportunity to introduce herself and share with us this new hot off the press resource. Marianne.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm super excited to be here with you and be a part of this conference. It's such great work that you're doing. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm Marianne Justice. I am a systems improvement specialist at WestEd. But before I donned this hat, I was a middle school and high school teacher in Brooklyn, New York for many years. So a lot of the things that we are discussing today, the things that you all are doing in your work and sharing is really hitting home and making me nostalgic, to be honest. So my hat is off to you. Regarding the field guide, the integrated care field guide, this was a labor of love. I was, along with Jeff and Michael Funk from CDE, one of the co-authors. I was the project manager and the editor. So this is like one of my children. I feel very strong connection to this document. But it was could not have been more of a group effort. As you can see on this slide, these were all of the organizations that contributed to this field guide. So we had such a range of expertise. It was really tremendous. And the vision was for the guide was that there was a lot of funding and initiatives that needed to be understood and woven together to meet the needs of the whole child. And so the guide is in part for LEAs to help them understand what the initiatives are, how to integrate funding and the connections between. So these organizations, that's okay, you can go back. These are the four main, this is what we called our coordination team: Breaking Barriers, the California Alliance, Santa Clara County Office of Ed, and West Ed. We met weekly to check in on progress of the guide. And in fact, we are still meeting regularly because it has come to our attention that the guide in and of itself is not going to just magically wave a wand and change things, but instead, so we're talking about, right, what else needs to happen? What are the next steps? What kind of technical assistance is needed in the field to do the work described within the guide? So we'll have a chance to talk about that a little bit later when we get into the discussion portion. But I'm super excited to hear from all of you, those of you in the field doing the work. What are your needs? What do you see as next steps? So thank you in advance. And speaking of thank you to the Stewart Foundation, our generous funder. We could not have produced this guide without funding from the Stewart Foundation. So wanted to give a shout out to them. I also want to provide an overview of what we'll be kind of talking about today. We'll take a look at the purpose and the structure of the field guide. Then we will look at one example of cross-sector collaboration, the challenges that can happen within cross-sector collaboration and sort of the importance and opportunities there as well. And then we'll have an opportunity to discuss where you are on this journey, as well as next steps that can be useful to you. And thank you, Jeff just reminded us, access to the guide is at the bottom of the Google Doc. So please feel free to access it there. Great. So without further ado, we can jump right into the purpose and the structure of the guide. So as Jeff set up so beautifully just a bit ago, this is really about the whole child, being able to set up opportunities and experiences for all children to thrive at each and every school site. So everyone has been talking about the whole child, but the truth is we still, so often the work gets done to meet the needs of children and youth in silos, right? And so there are challenges to really doing all the things that we know from research need to be done. So key elements of a whole child approach include positive developmental relationships, environments with safety and belonging, rich learning experiences and knowledge development, development of skills, habitats, and mindsets, and of course, integrated support systems. So a lot of this is probably ringing a bell when you think about expanded learning, right? There's a lot of overlap between the needs of the whole child and the work that is happening amongst this group. So you can hop over to the next one. Just a bit of sort of context for this. In the 2021 budget, right, as Jeff alluded to a bit earlier, we saw an unprecedented amount of funding across the board for students and families, and specifically for the whole child. So the last 2 years of the pandemic really laid bare the needs of children and families, right, and exposed the gaps in how various social sectors, education, mental health, social services, are or are not sometimes working together, right, to achieve a whole child system. So there have been substantial investments, and yet at the same time, there's a lack of connection amongst these organizations. So that is what this guide sets out to do, is to address that. So the idea being is that we recognize money alone won't solve this problem, right? LEAs need to be able to rebuild their systems so that they can work together to meet the needs of children and families. So to that end, the guide aims to make the case for establishing interagency school-based systems of care at the local level. Within this, and I'll talk about this in a moment, we look at several key initiatives, their funding sources, and perhaps most importantly, how they can be woven together and thought about as sort of within one purpose, and what support LEAs need and strategies for sustainable funding pathways. There's also a very important chapter on what the state needs to do, how the state can make room for this to happen and kind of clear up some of the red tape that often prevents this work from being possible at the logistics level, at least. So this is a graphic that we created for our presentation to Stuart, and it's within the guide. And this is sort of illustrating the difference between a centralized system and a decentralized system, right? So we as educators understand and live in a pretty decentralized system. We have 100 school districts, 50 counties, thousands of schools, right? School boards, superintendents, principals, directors. We all know what this world looks like, and we've figured out how to navigate it sometimes, but often it's kind of tricky. If you look at the left-hand side, this is an illustration of the healthcare system, which is not the easiest to navigate, don't get me wrong, but more centralized at least, right? It's very different from our decentralized education system. So, and yet we know that these two systems need to be working together to meet the needs of children and families. So the charge is then, how do you get health and human services agencies that are setting up an infrastructure to align with education? They don't know education, education doesn't know health and human services. So these are really important conversations to be having in order to figure out how to make this work. So we'll get into this, we go into depth about this in the field guide, but I also wanted to kind of give you an overview of the guide itself. There are 4 chapters to the guide. In the first one, we introduce the key frames and the contexts. And we also provide background on implementing and supporting a whole child approach by creating integrated school-based systems of care. I'll be honest with you, there was some back and forth about if we should use a framework. At one point we had the phrase, pick a framework, any framework in there, that got cut. But the truth of the matter is there are various frames that can work to address this, right? And we were not particularly wedded to one frame. Some people felt very strongly that we needed to be using a certain frame. Others felt strongly about others. But we felt that that kind of got in the way of really understanding and thinking about the core work here, right? Which is ultimately about supporting an integrated system to provide services for students and families. So we go into that a bit in chapter 1. Chapter 2 offers guidance to LEAs. This is the longest chapter because it outlines pretty clearly the 6 different initiatives. Apologize, there are 6, not 7. We had a little typo there. But the chapter describes the initiatives, including adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs Aware Initiative, Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, CYBHI, Children and Youth System of Care, community schools, early childhood initiatives, and expanded learning. So there's a discussion of each initiative that includes an overview of the initiative, frequent funding sources used for the initiative, considerations for sustainable implementation, and related resources. Expanded learning is bolded because I think that this expanded learning amongst all of these perhaps has the most promising infrastructure that currently exists. The time, the relationships with family and children in a way that sometimes during the school day might not be as feasible, but can be more possible through the expanded learning model. Great. And then in chapter 3, it's really about funding sustainability. And the 4th is guidance to the state. We wrote this chapter, well, first chapter 3, there are some concerns. I don't know if you have been hearing about this, about we're getting all this one-time funding and then what happens when the funding goes away, right? This funding cliff, right? So that is certainly something that we are thinking a lot about. So there are a few different graphics that we created for if you're in a position that it is someone who's thinking about that. There are some different ways to think about how to sort of strategically invest funds and build up certain places and perhaps not others for sustainability, so that you don't find yourself a little bit down the road, struggling once this one-time funding has not continued in the same way. So I encourage you to check that out if that's something that is of interest to you. And then chapter 4, guidance for the state, right? Again, knowing that sometimes all well-intended, the ways in which the guidance that comes down makes it tricky to do this work. So there is some guidance for how this work might be done at the state to make life easier and more possible to do this work at the local level. We also have created this nifty graphic. This was one of those things that took many, many weeks to get right, to illustrate the extent to which these various initiatives can provide or increase access to professional development and funding, an integrated workforce and governing structures, seeding partnerships and collaboration, and building infrastructure. So one example of how you can look at this if you're thinking about community schools, this illustrates how the Community Schools Initiative provides access to professional development and training, is an integrated workforce to a moderate extent, provides access to government structures to a small extent. It does seed partnerships and collaboration, and also provides infrastructure to provide services to students and families. So if this is something you're interested in seeing kind of the overlap amongst these initiatives, there's a much longer narrative section of the guide where you can find more information about that. And one essential piece of all of this actually working, right, is cross-sector collaboration. So we'll talk a bit about what that looks like, and then I'm going to share an example of how a few different initiatives have worked together. So first, the why collaborate across sectors. So when we do this, right, we establish shared goals and outcomes that make it easier for all to be working towards something. Shared leadership, instead of I'm doing this, you're doing that. Shared information and data, easier said than done, but trust me, folks are thinking a lot about this and really trying to muddle through how to make this work. Shared financing, again, complicated, but what would that look like? As well as a shared community. In addition to that, this one always gets me, cross-sector collaboration includes a collaborative leadership structure, right? Shared goals, community buy-in about the goals, joint commitment to contribute to and combine resources. This one can be a sticking point, and yet in the absence of this, we really can see some challenges. The creation of planning groups and teams. I know where I live in Yolo County, they have crafted a commission, a planning group and team to really kind of think about how to pull people together to do this work and establish an organizing framework for what this could look like, as well as a shared understanding and vision. The idea being that we're stronger together when we collaborate, right? When we do this, we work together to support the whole child and family. We ensure expertise across the disciplines. We reduce duplication of services. We create more effective use of resources, and we possibly increase potential funding. So what I want to talk about now is an example of what this cross-sector collaboration can look like. So by way of background, we did a number of profiles for Health and Human Services about ways in which some of the different initiatives are collaborating. And one that we did was on expanded learning. So here are some of the things that we pulled out. So Jeff talked a bit about these standards earlier, was mentioning that he has deep knowledge of these. These really hit home when we were thinking about how the expanded learning fits within this. So the standards that really hit well were safe and supportive environment, right? Active and engaged learning, skill building, youth voice and leadership, healthy choices and behaviors, and diversity, access, and equity. Also, to Jeff's point earlier, collaborative partnerships, right, is really essential. And for a bit of context, you can pop to the next one. This is part of, right, a statewide system of support. So the system of support for expanded learning consists of 16 county offices, 2 statewide intermediary organizations, California AfterSchool Network and ASAP Connect. And it exists to provide statewide and regional technical assistance to all of California's expanded learning programs. So the organizations that make up the system provide statewide and regional support in the form of coaching, training, brokering resources, mentoring, etc. So now this is an example of one type of cross-sector collaboration between expanded learning and CYBHI. So both of these, expanded learning and the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, have some things in common, right? They both intend to serve California's most vulnerable students and families. They both promote physical, social, and emotional health of children and youth. And they both build the infrastructure and the service delivery of primary and secondary prevention strategies. So as we highlighted in this profile, expanded learning is a great example of cross-sector collaboration between education and mental health. The conditions for success in the program that integrated these two areas include a common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and a backbone of support. So with that in mind, we would love to hear from you. We've given you a lot to think about. You know your contexts. What are the necessary conditions for really doing this type of work in your context? So we're going to give you a chance to meet again in breakouts to talk with a group about where are you on this journey? What additional information would be helpful to you as we roll out the field guide? And what are some next steps that you might like to see? So Jeff, I believe, is going to go ahead and put us back into our great breakouts.
So I'm going to recreate the room. So we'll have, we will have a different configuration of discussants. But what I also want to share with you is in the Google Doc. You might want to access the slide deck or some of these resources as you're having your discussion. You can do that, and that is in the chat box right now. I also encourage you to go ahead and add questions to the garden. But we're going to go ahead and have about we'll close the rooms in 4 minutes. You'll have 60 seconds at the end of that process to wrap up your conversations, and then we'll catch you back here in the main room. Enjoy your dialogue. Welcome, Carissa. You have entered the workshop at a time of small group discussions. They just began, so I'm going to go ahead and put you into a meeting room. You're welcome. All right, off to room 2. Welcoming our folks back. Loving to see some of that interaction in the chat box, but even more importantly, right, as you all reflect and interact with one another about what you're hearing. So here's where we are on our journey. We've got just under a half an hour left here. And we've gone, if you can imagine, an upside down triangle, right? At the sort of the top or the longest end of the triangle, we have the context and opportunity. We're coming into narrowing down on the triangle to a resource that supports application. And now we're coming down to the point of the triangle that is actually the application point. And just really excited to be able to welcome, and with deep gratitude, Jennifer Cisneros from the Santa Ana Unified School District to share a little bit about what they're doing. And without further ado, I will just turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. My name is Jennifer Cisneros. I'm the Director for Expanded Learning Programs in Santa Ana Unified. I always love to share that I was a club kid. I was in an after-school program, my siblings and I, and teen volunteer, turned into summer program staff, turned into helping to support the expansion of ACES 21st Century and et al. In a community-based organization. So I have that experience and background. I know the challenges of trying to integrate supports from a community-based organization standpoint, as well as now working for an LEA. You know, it's interesting because we had a really great conversation in our breakout room, and I really appreciated Brisa's point of view, and I'm going to embed it somehow into this conversation, because I think it's a really good point, and it's actually challenging. It was challenging me in my thinking and thinking about my own system. One of the things that, you know, in order for us to start talking about integrated systems, honestly, it always starts with us, the expanded learning people, kind of wedging our way in. Where can we have a seat at the table? We have to be at the table if we're going to start talking about integrating our supports or integrating, you know, systems. And so, and I chuckle because sometimes it's bringing your own lawn chair or your own folding chair and like carrying it around and like, what are the conversations? Like, I just remember wanting to know everything that was happening when LCAP was first coming out and LCFF, and I was working in a community-based organization. It was about learning everything I needed to learn about it to see where do I fit into this so that I can leverage the conversation. When the ELOP started coming out, I read everything that was available. There wasn't that much when it first launched because I wanted to be the expert, because I wanted to figure out where I could be the resource, where I could leverage other resources. And so it's really like trying to figure out where you need to be and who you need to be talking to, which can be really difficult trying to get in front of somebody in a district, right? When people are busy, maybe it's not their priority, but maybe it just takes a little bit of tenacity and persistence as well. I was sharing with someone earlier, no means not now, so keep going. But if you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide, Jeff, just a little bit of background for those who aren't familiar with Santa Ana Unified. We are a relatively large district, 44,000 students, almost 96% Hispanic and Latino population, 85% free and reduced lunch, 35% English learners. And you can tell we have quite a few school campuses, 59 schools, including programs throughout our district and our boundaries. If you go to the next slide. So one of the things that's been really exciting that's happened in our district, it's really helpful when there's aligned vision and goals. We all kind of know where we're going. We all might be getting there in a little bit of a different way, depending on what your role is and what you support. But our board, we had LCAP goals, and then we had board priorities, and it was so exciting when those two converged, and now we have district board priorities, which are also our LCAP priorities. So you'll see student achievement, social emotional wellness, public health, family and community engagement, and then the foundation there is organizational efficiency and effectiveness. We report on a regular basis to our board on where the progress of these goals and the work that's coming up that's aligned to the priorities. So it feels really good to work in a system where at least we all kind of know where we're headed. The other thing, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, this is relatively new, just released within the last, I think it's been like 5 months, is our district graduate profile. So there is a team of parents, families, a community, district stakeholders who were part of the development of this graduate profile. They worked on this for over a year. A lot of learning that had to go into it before, a lot of calibration. And now we have a graduate profile. This is just another layer that's kind of guiding and directing our work. There's still a lot of work that has to be done in terms of really, what does this look, sound, and feel like in each of our classrooms, and each grade level in the after school program? What does this look like? And so we've started that work as a leadership team to really dissect this and build it out for the different levels and the different programs in our district. So that work is continuing, but at least we all feel like there's a sense of like, okay, we're on the right path. We're on the same path, going in the same direction. And then just to give you a little bit of context, this does not include ELOP. So this is pre-ELOP. This is just a little background of what expanded learning looks like in our district. So we currently have, we call our after school program Engage 360. So when you see that logo there, that is our expanded learning department logo. We have 41 schools. When we are at full capacity and we're fully staffed, we have the capacity to serve almost 6,500 kids. That is between ACES, 21st Century, and then our board did not want to have any wait lists, so they contributed general funds from our LCAP allocation to ensure that there were no wait lists in any of our programs. So this was pre-COVID, well, I guess technically pre-COVID, but pre-ELOP. We have approximately 382 employees. And then these are the primary elements of our program: academics, assistance, health and wellness, and enrichment. And then we do work with 7 community-based organizations. We are a district-ran expanded learning program, but we do bring in outside providers to offer unique enrichment opportunities to our students. And so we're really excited about those partnerships. And we have other no-cost partnerships with like Girls Inc., Girl Scouts, Big Brothers Big Sisters. I mean, we have other community partners that we engage in and bring into our programs, but these are our core 7 that have gone through a competitive process. Now with ELOP, this program is going to grow to serve anywhere between, because of the vague language, 10,000 to 20,000 students. Our minimum is 10,000. We are anticipating going from 382 employees for this program to anywhere between 800 and 900 staff total. And those 7 partners, we're looking to grow to 30 community-based organizations through a request for proposal process. So we're really excited, but that's a lot. It's a pretty huge expansion. And then if you go to the next slide, I don't want to leave out our high school assets programs, which we have 6 of those school sites. We do have 1 school site that is, we opened with ESSER funding. So it's not an assets funded site, but we do have a 7th high school site. We do serve around 1,000 students a day with 50 to 60 employees within these programs. And they have the same program elements, except we have a really concentrated program around work-based learning. with our CTE department and actually funnels into our after school program for for internship hours and things like that. And then we have a really comprehensive built out leadership program. And so not that we don't offer leadership in our elementary and intermediate, but it's like on steroids in the high school program, really trying to mirror that ASB structure, but within the after school setting. And then I do want to say that we did write into our plan some elements just of high school. We know the primary focus is TK through 6, but we didn't exclude them. So we did a lot of this mentoring. Okay, so this here is some of the highlights, very, very high highlights of our plan. And these were just the things that really stood out. And if you look at this mentoring, we built in a lot of elementary, high school mentoring. One with our big brothers, big sisters, but also we're integrating sports. And so we're trying to maybe bring in some of the high school teams to come and do clinics with our younger kids and build that mentoring through the sports element. You'll see sports leagues is another thing that we're adding into our program. Our kids don't, if they don't have the resources to join leagues, whether it's Little League or AYSO is what we have here in Orange County, then they don't participate in those types of programs. So we're bringing the programs to them, the opportunity at the site level, service learning, leadership, community. I mentioned the community provider enrichment, and then academic supports. When we're talking about integration, so many of these things we're not doing alone. We can't do these things in a silo. The sports leagues, we already have a department that runs intramural sports. So the conversation has been around, okay, Christina, how can we collaborate? Let's talk about what you're doing. What is your vision? Where can we take the intramural sports leagues if you had the resources to do it? And when you start to ask people that question, they can dream really big. We don't necessarily have the infrastructure to run an entire sports league, but we're starting to talk about how do we leverage the current resources, the internal structures that exist, and how can we build in those supports to be able to do that. And so we're partnering with, she works out of our teaching and learning department. And so we're building that infrastructure. So not only are we running intramural sports at the middle school level, but it's going to push down into the elementary level. And then there's a pipeline of mentoring that's built throughout that structure alone. And we're talking about replicating that in other ways. The academic supports, we are not the subject matter experts when it comes to education in a traditional sense. And so we're bringing in the experts to come in and talk to us about what are the fun things that you don't get to do that are in your curriculum, all those supplemental materials, like how can we incorporate those that are reinforced, they're reinforcements, but they're fun, and kids are coming to academic enrichments, but there's that disguised learning that we love to do in the out of school time space. And so they're working with us, we're working with a group of curriculum specialists because they're the specialists. They're gonna come in and support that. And there's excitement that's generated around that for them. And then, so I'm going to jump from this because I want to jump into the next section, but there's so many other things, other groups in the system that we're working with. Can I ask Jeff if we can actually skip to is it the next slide? I'm going to come back to this, but I wanted to, no, it's the next one. Sorry. Thank you. I wanted to start with this one first because there's the story behind this social emotional learning framework. When it was about, I don't even know, 5 or 6 years ago, PCY, the Partnership for Children and Youth, launched a PLC centered around SEL, and the focus was alignment with the expanded learning programs and the school day. And how do we bridge that gap? What are ways that we can develop action plans, do some of the integration work around SEL? And we signed up as a district, and we didn't realize you're supposed to go as a team. And I went as like one person. And so I was a team of one. And this is important because this is kind of where everything started for us. So I'm like, well, how do I align? I got to figure out who the players are. I was new to the district. And now I'm having to figure this out. And so I started asking questions, and I found out that Sonia Llamas, who, if you were at the plenary, she was the director of school climate at the time. And so I'm like, Sonia, I need you on my team. This is what we're doing. You support SEL. Now our team of one turned into a team of two. She got on board. We started to find the connections. She had no idea what we did in expanded learning. And then she started learning about my program. I started learning about her work and all the ways that we started finding all the intersections, right, of our work. And so what happened is we got more people on our team. She helped recruit principals to be on our team. So by the end of this PLC, we had a pretty robust team. And then we learned that there really wasn't a lot happening for social emotional learning in the schools. There was more happening in the after school. And so we were taking a lot of lessons from the after school setting. And then Sonia got promoted to the assistant soup, and she took on MTSS. And there was an arm of that, which was SEL, and she asked me to lead the SEL subcommittee for the district, which was insane. But it's about getting our work out there, making those connections and finding out who those people are and starting to find the cross sections. And now we led a team to create this SEL framework for the entire district. And this work is being pushed out throughout the entire system. Yes, there should be a note at the bottom that we looked at the CASTLE framework. So I don't want to think, I'm not plagiarizing anybody's work here. There is another version of the framework that does have the subnote that references their work. But I wanted to start there because that was how Sonia went from being a colleague, and her and I were working together to then she became a leader in the system and was really pushing and supporting expanded learning. But it goes back to the conversation that Brisa and I were having in our breakout room, because she brought up a really good point. She said, what happens when the people who do understand the system and the structure and they're the advocates leave the system? She says it's very easy for things to they could easily just kind of fade away because of that decentralization. And so that really had me thinking, like, Sonia's a huge cheerleader. If she went away, what would happen? If I left, what would happen? And so that's something that I'm going to have to think about. And really the question is, how do we ensure that this becomes systemic so that no matter who's in what roles, it's just built into the system? Exactly, Jane. Like we got to build in the sustainability through the system and the structure of the system. But we can go back if you want to go back 2 slides. I'm trying to keep an eye. Oh my gosh, I'm keeping an eye on the time. So through COVID, another thing that happened was we needed to start talking about what was going to be our reopening of schools plan. We did not reopen all of last year. Our first, the first time we brought students back to school on campus in person was summer of last year. That was kind of our transition period. But we had a team that was working on the reentry, the reopening. And through that plan, through that committee, I was asked to lead our target team 4 for the district on the reopening, on wellness. There was a lot of tie-in to SEL, wellness. We had a huge conversation around that. And, but born from that was this idea of a wellness coordinated care team, and really creating kind of hubs at each school so that there was, leveraging ESSER funds, leveraging our department funds, some of the different dollars from different departments through different grants. The goal was to have a school counselor on every campus. Elementary didn't have school counselors, so putting counselors on every elementary campus, social workers on every school campus. FACE is our family community engagement team department, so making sure they run our wellness centers on each campus. A health services person, and then after school staff. So all of these people are working together to coordinate wellness on a school campus. Whether, there's referral processes. We've built out a template that shows like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supports in each of these areas. So people know what their roles are. So being clear and we don't want people to think that the after school people are who you send kids when they really need a social worker. So being clear about who to send for what types of services. And then if you go to the next slide, we do a lot of work. Our work with the support services department has really grown in the last few years, and even really through the pandemic. You'll see here, this is not my report. This is something that comes out of the support services department, but you will see our logo there that says Engage 360. We are one of their collaborating partners in the area of restorative practices. And so what's been really exciting is we have staff who we've trained, we align in part of our alignment is that, and through that Partnership for Children and Youth, one of the things that came out of there is we had all of our staff trained in restorative practices, and the support services division provided that support. They provided the oversight. They went out and did observations to make sure like certifications were completed. And so, but then what we found, what we were able to do is we were able to leverage that training, and principals were able to use their site dollars to pay our staff extra hours to come in and provide restorative practice services, RP 360, during the school day. So they were leveraging site dollars. We trained the staff. We work with them. We collaborate on how that's all managed and coordinated. And they were getting additional services during the school day for their students. They would go in and model circles for teachers. They would pull kids out if that was the need. They would mediate, conflicts. And you can see all that data there is not just the after school program, but it's really, it's including the work of the Engage 360 program in terms of restorative practices. And then another area that we found was PBIS. So that's another alignment piece. We push in PBIS into our after school programs. There's alignment there. And there was a request for us to support the school day in terms of lunchtime and recess, and not necessarily pushing our staff in to lunchtime or recess, because then we would have a union issue, but really it was about helping to train and support the noon duty supervisors to be able to have structured recess time, to be able to use PBIS strategies on the playground. And so they also use their site dollars, and we bring in a site coordinator to be able to support during those times, in the recess setting. And then the coordination of services team process, that is our cost team. So when there's a student, they look at the data, they look at what students are needing supports, and our staff are part of the coordination team that is on campus to talk about how are we gonna support little Johnny who is struggling here or struggling with this. And then we are sometimes part of the solution. We'll enroll kids into the program, or we'll do check-in, check-out if that student has a connection with an after-school staff. It just depends on the student and the needs.
Just flagging Jane's question, just wondering if that is all is that all part of the LCAP? Is that formalized through the LCAP process?
So here's the thing I forgot to mention in our first session. Because of ELOP, we were able, our site coordinators are all part-time, which is really difficult. Through ELOP, we've been able to negotiate that those positions are going to be full-time positions, and we've rewritten into their job descriptions that this is part of the support that they provide at a school site. Not paid out of ELOP dollars, I want to be very clear, because it's clear about how we can use the dollars, but we were able to, because of ELOP, we were able to move things around to be able to push that in. And now it's just sites don't actually have to use their dollars. It's now written into the structure. And every site will get it now, not just sites who opt into it. They will now be accessible to everybody. I am paying attention to the time, so I'm just going to quickly say that we do have, through partnerships with our support services and their mental health team, we are able to have a dedicated, or they have staff who have shift schedules to be able to support after hours crisis issues. And so there's always someone on call who's able to support. But now with ELOP, we're actually able to hire people that are dedicated to the expanded learning time, the expanded learning hours that will be dedicated to our team. So that's really exciting. And then I'm kind of pushing us through, Jeff, sorry. This is our We Care campaign. So this has evolved, and our staff has since been asked to be represented on the team, on the committee. So every year this gets a little bit bigger. It started out as a We Care day. It's turned into a week and a month. And now I know the team is working on it being something that's embedded year round. So this is such a great initiative, really trying to support students in their mental health and know that there is somebody, no matter how bad you're feeling, come and seek someone. We all wear We Care shirts so people know it says, come and see us. It's pretty amazing. And teens have really bought into this, which has been really nice. Health services has been integrated with the after school program. There's nurses, very similar to our social workers. We are now adding them into our plan. So we'll have dedicated health services staff as well through our ELOP. I'm gonna keep us going. Teaching and learning is also part of that whole child. So we've been asked, so it's one of those things where in the beginning, you're trying to wedge and stake your claim at the table. And now we're being asked to join the table, which is a very different feeling. And I do think, Brisa, that's kind of part of some of the systemic change where other departments are reaching out to us. The universal pre-K, I did not know that was coming down the pipeline. And all of a sudden I'm being asked to join these conversations, and we're needed at the table. And it's more work, but I will take it because it means that they see that we're needed to be part of that process. College and career, we partner with that department. Academic supports, I mentioned earlier, through our plan. They're supporting us. And then CTE, we have a really big partnership with them and a community-based organization where we're providing wraparound work-based learning opportunities for our students in a three-way partnership. And the last slide, last but definitely not least, we cannot forget our special education department. We have students who come to us. We do not turn any students away based on their needs, period. I don't care if they have an IEP that ends at the end of the bell. I always hear it's bell to bell. I was sharing this with Jeff earlier. We will figure out a way to make sure a student can be part of our program. And if you look at that last item in the very bottom right-hand corner, it says identify support staff. So we work with our special ed department. Most of the students who come to us with special needs or IEPs, they thrive in an after-school setting. We don't find that they need a lot of the supports that they need during the school day for whatever reason. But there are those situations where they do need one-on-one. And so we've identified, we set aside money in our budget to be able to pay extra duty for staff. We'll identify a staff on campus. We'll rotate it out, we'll shift it out, whatever we need to do to get that person to be able to access the program, we will. And we work with our special ed department to be able to do that. They also coordinate professional development with us. It has been an amazing journey with them. And it's also been one that has developed, because before it was, nope, IEP is bell to bell, like that's it, there's no services. And we've really gotten them to evolve from that to a place where there's really great partnership. I'm gonna stop there because we're over time, I'm so sorry. There are some other things I'd be happy to talk to anybody. And Brisa, you're leaving me thinking a little bit more about how do we make sure that there's a sustainability to all of what we're doing. So I appreciate your conversation.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And just putting it out there too, that through the event app, there's two things you can do. One, you can find us. We're in there, so you can reach out to us through the event app. And then also you can let us know how we did. There's a feedback section for within the app to really provide data on this entire event and how and whether it met your needs today. So thank you to all of you who have joined. I want to thank our panelists, Jennifer and Marianne from West Ed and Santa Ana Unified School District. And thank you for everything that you do each and every day to support whole children, whole families, and whole communities. This not only concludes our workshop, but it also concludes the expanded learning opportunities convening today. So there is not a closing plenary. We are going to release you now to the rest of your day. Looks like it's almost 3 o'clock. So those after school programs will be firing up. All right, team, keep up the great work out there. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, y'all. Take care.